15 video game related creepypasta stories that will haunt your soul. (15) Ben Drowned. Perhaps the most famous and well-known creepypasta would have to be Ben Drowned. The story tells the story of a Majora's Mask video game cartridge that had been said to be haunted by a ghost by the name of Ben. The original story was created by Alex Hall and was later turned into an alternate reality video game. It follows the player as he plays through the said-to-be haunted video game cartridge that he had received from an old man. The story then proceeds to show signs of haunting and chilling story aspects that result in the player finding that the game is not the game he thought it was, with textures missing throughout the game, and previous save files already existing, one of which being named Ben. This story began to circulate due to a YouTube video by the name of Ben Drowned, and since then it has become a significant phenomenon in both the creepypasta lore and in the Legend of Zelda. There aren't many people out there that have not heard of this story, and if you haven't, it's worth the read. 14. Pokemon, Strangled Red. Do you like Pokemon and horror, and possibly Pokemon and horror mixed together? If your answer was yes, this is the perfect story for you. There is a creepypasta out there that has been circulating by the name of Pokemon, Strangled Red. It follows the story of a normal Pokemon lover as he finds a copy of an original Pokemon Red cartridge had been thrown away, and of course he prompted to politely ask if he could take it for himself, in which he was given the go-ahead. As the story progresses, the innocent fan found that not only was the sticker starting to peel off the cartridge, the game itself was titled Pokemon, Strangled Red version as opposed to its original moniker. The game is proceeded to be an assumed hack of the original Pokemon Red cartridge with some of the original aspects of the game still intact. And toward the end of his playthrough, he found that he was left with the option of Strangle, which he decided to choose. He then finds a ghostly version and a distorted name of S!3v3n, and as he attempted to continue onwards, the game simply tells him no. 13. Lavender Town Syndrome. Another Pokemon-related creepypasta by the name of Lavender Town Syndrome has also created waves of interest due to its creepy nature and potential true nature. It is simply described as a series of suicides and illnesses of children in their younger ages that became clear after the release of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green in Japan. The story, although a creepypasta, is said to resemble some truth even if none of it is factual, as it perfectly describes. I personally always found the music to be creepy, and many stories and videos became a regular thing because of it. It is said the original Lavender Town tune was played in extremely high frequencies that only younger kids could hear, that prompted their sickness and eventual suicide. As far as creepypastas go, this one is one of the most believable ones, given the nature of its origin and the descriptive possibilities of such a thing. 12. Herobrine. If you think Minecraft is dead, which it undoubtedly is becoming factual, this may not be the story for you. However, those that are interested will be happy to know that there is indeed a Minecraft-related creepypasta that has made several waves through the internet in Let's Plays and the like. This particular creepypasta follows the story of a character named Herobrine who is described to be Notch's dead brother that somehow makes himself known into the Minecraft world. As much as people would like to believe this is a true story, Notch has no brother. The odd thing about all of this leads to the fact that there is absolutely no mention of Herobrine in any of the code for Minecraft, and the character is strictly used as a scare factor. There have been Let's Players who still play Minecraft that have described the addition of Herobrine as a ghost-like figure and have shown terror for his inclusion into the Minecraft world. 11. Godzilla. Godzilla is not only one of the most well-written video game-related creepypastas out there, but it's also described as being one of, if not the longest, creepypasta ever written. This particular creepypasta follows the story of a gamer that uncovers several disturbing characters and levels in a modified or hacked version of Godzilla, monster of monsters. While this particular creepypasta has been praised for its length as evident through its use of chapters, it's also been praised for its genius storytelling and use of manipulated images that really set the tone and creates a believable atmosphere for the story. The length is particularly noteworthy as it had to be split into 8 separate chapters, all including their own special taste for what the entire story has to offer. It gained a lot of popularity back in 2011 when the original author posted the first chapter titled Earth and Mars, and since then, it's become incredibly well known in the creepypasta lore. 10. Slenderman. Everybody knows about Slenderman by now, but that doesn't take away from its significance of creating one of the most chilling backstories in creepypasta history. Now, I've gone on record as saying that I'm not the biggest fan of the video game franchise anymore as it has become a bit stable, but when the story was circulating, people were reporting they were starting to see Slender Man figures around the world, and before we knew it, it became a significant phenomenon not only in the creepypasta world, but in the video game world. You would have to have been living under a rock to not have heard of Slender Man by now, as many Let's Players and people alike have reported sights of Slender Man, although you can really only take that as words as he doesn't really exist. But, the story itself is rather chilling and it's worth a read, or 2, or 5. 9. Mario. Something that has become a common trend specifically with video game related creepypasta is the fact that a lot of them eventually get turned into an actual ROM that allows people to play the story that was described through the original creepypasta. Mario is a good example of this, as it is a creepypasta that not only has a chilling story, but also allows those interested to play through the story themselves. Mario is as expected a Super Mario World ROM hack that is described near the end of the story as a nightmare in which Mario is atoning for his actions in a hell version of Yoshi's Island. The story follows a player that decides to download the Super Mario World hack and you watch as he experiences it firsthand. Things like this are rather spine-chilling because you oftentimes want to experience it for yourself firsthand, but if you're too scared like I would probably be, the creepypasta lays it out very well with descriptions and images. 8. Fallout 3, Point Lookout. Fallout 3 is also no stranger to creepypasta lore, as is to be expected, especially considering the environment you see yourself submerged in during your playthrough of Fallout 3. If you're unaware, there is a DLC titled Point Lookout in which this particular creepypasta is based off of. It follows the story as two brothers finally decide to check out the DLC, and from what I can gather, they decided to play through one of the quests that is described as retrieving a special book, and if you're not aware, the way you get to Point Lookout in the game is via boat. However, in this particular playthrough, the brother playing found that he was unable to go back to Point Lookout because the guy that owned the boat was no longer there. This started the chaos that eventually led to their copy of Fallout 3 to freeze and restart. On the Creepypasta wiki, there is some concern regarding the lack of terror in this story, but I always love a good story about someone witnessing the game in a different way. 7. Xbox Live. Xbox Live is a creepypasta based on, you guessed it, a single man's perspective on what happened as he joined an Xbox Live party. It starts off with a player receiving an invitation to join an Xbox Live party only to find out that he was the only one in the party, at least that's what he thought at first. You come to find out that instead of talking to someone on the other end, he is undoubtedly talking to himself, and his in-game avatar follows along with it. Not only does this send a shiver down my own spine, I always wondered what it'd be like if the avatars we have in Xbox Live and the like would come to life. I don't necessarily believe something like this could ever happen, as this is just a story, but imagine for a second if your console came to life, what would you do? There's little to no way to prepare for an instance like that. 6. The Endless Maze. I've read several creepypasta stories, but I think the ones that tell the story of a person being trapped are some of my all-time favorites. This particular creepypasta titled The Endless Maze is seen to have been based off of Bomberman, and it follows the character or player as they write entries into their diary on a day-to-day basis. You start to notice a trend of the character feeling lost or stuck within this maze, as the title of the creepypasta would entail. I really enjoy this one particularly, like I said, because of the terror that could potentially come along with being stuck in a confined place for so long. I've heard stories of people going completely insane inside a small room as they sit in there for weeks at a time. This creepypasta encompasses that ideal, but there's a twist that of course I won't reveal here. 5. Jack the Ripper game. Have you heard of Jack the Ripper? Of course you have. He's one of the most well-known unidentified serial killers that ever walked this land. He's become so famous that people don't seem to believe he actually existed, but that doesn't stop people from creating stories about him. Creepypasta is, of course, home to one of these titled Jack the Ripper game. It follows the story of a man who enjoys spending his free time playing item search games like Where's Waldo and the like. He then begins to talk about a game titled The Murders of Jack the Ripper, which as you'd expect follows the same trend of item search. However, the story gets darker as he starts to realize a dark reality of the game he once loved as a kid. This particular creepypasta seems to take the same form as other video game creepypasta stories, where it consists of a haunted cartridge. If you have ever been interested in the story of Jack the Ripper, this one is certainly worth a read. 4. Virtual reality. As we get further into the golden age of technology, we find ourselves finding new and exciting ways to use the technology we already own, and create stories and adventures for ourselves and others. That also has not stopped people from writing horrifyingly well-written creepypasta stories. This one is titled Virtual Reality, and one of the most terrifying things with stories revolving around technology is the potentiality for such things to happen. This creepypasta, although short, follows an adventure as a character that straps on a virtual reality helmet and steps into a glass chamber. As the story progresses, you come to find that not only was this character submerged into a virtual reality world, his actions in that world ended up causing an attack on Harper Johnson Middle School. This can raise some alarm, as it's definitely possible for someone to get so submerged into virtual reality that they forget they are even in virtual reality. It's a great read, and a short one. 3. The perfect video game. I don't really condone an overuse of games, but I certainly understand the addiction side of it. A creepypasta by the name of The Perfect Video Game also showcases this in an uneasy-putting way. This story follows an individual as he tries to find any source that'll lead him to the so-called perfect video game console, but in his journey he starts to find that this console is causing people to become so attached to their TVs. To the point, of course, that this person would find instances of multiple deaths relating to this so-called console. Added commentary includes speaking about articles where local officials would try to contact the manufacturer of the console that was causing all these instances, but they were left with a reference to an address of a warehouse that no longer exists. 2. LSD, Dream Emulator. We've seen creepypasta stories give a violent twist on already existing games, and that's what the story of LSD, Dream Simulator, is based around. Believe it or not, LSD, Dream Simulator is actually a game that was developed and published by Asmodee Entertainment for the PlayStation. The creepypasta follows the players as he finds himself submerged into this obscure game, but instead of getting the game he expected, he finds himself playing a different copy of the game as he was unable to play his original copy as it was corrupted. The violence described in this story is of women and children in gruesome situations. He also finds out that he loses control of his character during his playthrough but presses forward. I've never personally played LSD, Dream Simulator, but the author has described that the creepypasta is in no way meant to degrade the original game, as he mentions his story is meant to be more violent than the actual game. 1. Pokemon, Creepy Black. There are so many well-written Pokemon-related creepypasta stories that it's nearly impossible to narrow them down, but that's the reason there are a few of them on this list. This particular one is titled Pokemon Creepy Black and it follows the story of a bootleg copy of Pokemon Red, but the twist is within this game as you find yourself controlling nothing but the ghost that you'd find in the Lavender Town mansion. It's said that throughout the game, you'll fight other Pokemon as you would normally in the game. However, whenever you defeat the Pokemon, the screen would go black and you'd hear their distorted cry. The author of this story says the cry is to signify the death of the Pokemon. Usually in a Pokemon game, there are no deaths, the Pokemon only faints. As you reach the end of the game, you find yourself in a battle with the ghost, and ends the trainer's life.